Hey, what's good, brother?
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good, man.
Sorry, I
So,
didn't realize that I had Zoom or didn't have Zoom downloaded here on this computer.
oh, you're fine, man. This,
All right.
where are you living at right now?
So right now we're in Houston. It's been pretty hectic. We've been bouncing around. Like went from home bases in Chicago, real home base like we were talking about, which I did not know you were so close in Wisconsin. And then bounced around to Houston and then kind of Miami and Philly and just kind of been like tacking around.
Yeah, because I feel like you're on the road all the time. I've seen you lifting at like
Yeah.
every gym, a different gym every month.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is, which obviously isn't the best and something that I really do kind of take down for any sort of prep or anything like that. Like I can't really do that probably starting like 16 weeks out, but every time that I'm kind of in between preps or this is the first meet in 6 or 7 weeks that I'm going to be taking as kind of like a train through meet, no real prep, no real, just told a bunch of buddies I'd be there, so just going to go have kind of a fun SBD day. And between preps, I kind of take advantage and try and bounce around and see as many like buddies and people around as I can.
Yeah, so it's just kind of networking. You're,
Pretty much. Like just fortunate enough to be buddies with, I guess a decent amount of people in the community. And unfortunately, a bunch of strong people don't live near each other. It's like always spaced out all over the country. And there's like, some hot spots that definitely I love to go to and get to see, kind of everybody at once or as many people at once as I can.
no, I was talking about this with some other guys where like Houston is the up and coming place where everyone's moving to. Everyone's down there with Jamal and Russ and all those guys, and it's blowing up down there.
Dude, it's crazy. I didn't. There's like as much as I wish San Antonio and Houston were those two kind of crews were in the same place, because then it would be like a whole different, kind of thing. Like, I mean, yes, Russ and Jamal, and that kind of corrupted crew over here. You have Derek here, and uh, there's a decent crew here, but San Antonio is what people don't talk about as much, just because Houston is more social media driven. You know what I mean? All the gyms there and everything is super dialed into social media. In San Antonio, at Blake LeHue.
Yes.
So Blake, at Primal Strength, I think that gym's the strongest gym in the country. It has to have the strongest average dots around. I mean, Jesus pops in there, but you have Shane, you have Gabriel Didden, you have uh, Blake, Lugo. You have so many guys. There's like 10 plus, 15 plus, like 500-pound benchers. There's a really young kid there, JJ Falk, that's coming up in the 100 kilo, who's like disgustingly strong for no reason. He's like 18, 19 years old. But Texas and specifically Houston and San Antonio just have these like super high concentrations of strength. It's awesome, and they're good people, which is obviously the most important part. But you don't. It's none of those kind of psychos doing anything. It's just some good chill dudes who happen to be like super strong guys. So it's fun. I think this Pioneer meet that's coming up in whatever, I think 2 weeks or something like that is going to be insane.
Yeah, see, I forgot too that Shane Hunt had just moved over there because obviously everyone knows Jesus is in San Antonio and
Mm-hmm.
he put up the most ridiculous total of all time the other day.
Dude,
I mean,
I
what'd you
can't.
think of that?
I thought it was the most. See, so like I don't like the whole. I mean, not so much the whole thing on Instagram right now that a bunch of people. Oh, is Jesus the goat? It's like, all right, relax. But in terms of a single performance, I can't think of a singular performance that was better, like, or more impressive. Like, you can argue, of course, John at the 661 dots at 198, sure. Some of Ed's stuff, okay. And then individual lifts, Danny's 1075, Jamal's 2300. It's all great, but nobody. That's the raw. When you think about all the facets of it, he's 24 years old. He's natural. It's in the IPF. It's under the heaviest scrutiny you could possibly have in any federation. It's a 2 hour weigh-in. It's on an Alico stiff bar. He traveled to a different country for it. He's natural and just out totaled everybody that's ever picked up a barbell in his life. It's his first year out of juniors. It's not a normal thing. As much as I, would love, I love Dan Bell and you pay homage to everybody that ever, has done anything. He's kind of taking a shit on powerlifting. Like, that's insane. You know what I mean? Like, think about that's it's kind of a joke. Like, everybody that's ever taken PEDs or anything like that, this guy's just built that differently. I don't know what to say about it.
Yeah, it's absolutely freakish. And I feel like every year there's more and more ridiculous performances across the board. I mean, well, you spend time around all these guys. Do you ever like have skepticism about people's natural status? Or are you pretty much
Of
you feel
course. I mean,
confident?
Jesus is somebody I haven't had the opportunity to actually meet in person. We've talked, over DM for quite a while now, maybe a little bit over a year, and he's somebody I'm going to be with him in whatever, maybe a week or two in San Antonio. Obviously, from no standpoint of the way he acts or being shady or anything like that, but it's just like, oh my god, dude, like what? It's very, like 25, 40, I think. It's like it's very tough. But then again, I think it really is something where unless you have proof of any of this stuff, you know what I mean? You're really kind of going to make an ass out of yourself saying it, right? Because you're going to say, oh, well, you're not natural because you're stronger than everybody. And they're going to say, yeah, but I get tested and I'm in a tested fed. They just have more on their side of the argument. You know what I mean? But it's, of course you do. You're like, how is these guys? Because these guys on the untested side who are taking stuff and totaling these massive things are also, just as genetically gifted. You'd want to say, like there's no way that there's just, a lot of these guys that compete in tested feds are that much more genetically gifted than these guys who are blasting things in the untested. And then you're looking at totals being so comparable. It's just like ridiculous. But let's say somebody I know for a fact, right? My coach, Rondell Hunt, who is one of the strongest human beings on the face of planet Earth. He doesn't even drink coffee. He's like the nattiest natty of all time. He called me like, whatever, 7-8 months ago, super shady on the phone. And he's like, yo, like, I'm like, what's up, Ron? He's like, do you take creatine? I was like, yeah, Ron, like, what? I'm like, you don't? He's like, no, like, since when have you? I'm like, sixth grade? Like, I don't know, dude. Like, what are you talking? It's creatine. And he's like, you think I should start? I'm like, dude, this isn't like you're fine. Like, take creatine. He took it. And like, it's 10, 20 pound PRs on everything, at already like an 800 plus squat, 560 plus pound bench, and damn near 900-pound pull on a stiff bar conventional. It's, there are freaks out there, as much as you don't want to believe it, because everybody works as hard as everybody else and everybody is super genetically gifted. They exist. And, it's something you kind of just have to eat and like take with a grain of salt.
Well, I think to be really strong, have a big total in any facet of powerlifting, tested or untested, like it comes down to genetics to a large extent. So the top guys, tested or untested, it is elite genetics to an extent to get to that point, because I've seen a lot of guys where, you take as much gear as possible and you still have a hard time cracking that level. So a lot of it is genetics and regardless of drug use. But it's kind of funny with my audience. I've seen it where the guys who watch my channel really prefer the untested side of things because there's a lot less skepticism there, and it's a lot more open as far as people talking about PEDs and shedding more light on the situation. But there's always been, anytime it's a top natural guy, lifting wise, or even like Nick Bear, he's like runs, body builds, all that,
Mm-hmm.
and supplements. People are very skeptical of his claims. So that turns a lot of guys off. Like a lot of my audience I've found, even though they don't take anything, 90% of them don't take anything, yet 90% of them prefer the untested side of things because it's just more believable. They like it better. So I thought that was really interesting, where there appears to be more transparency with the untested side of things, and that turns a lot of people on, whereas it turns them off with the tested side because they just don't believe it.
100%. I think that what the tested side of powerlifting has on the untested side of powerlifting is structure, right? Especially, I mean, if you want to talk before the split, whatever, a year or two ago, between IPF and USAPL, it was the only route, right, in powerlifting ever that had a very clear, okay, I'm going to go to a local meet, I'm going to qualify and go to state, or go to a state meet and qualify for nationals. If I win nationals, I go to worlds and I'm a world champion, right? All in the same testing pool, no division. It's perfect. That's the one thing that I think it really has. What I think it really doesn't have is actually quite a bit, personally, right? I think the USAPL probably overall organizationally is the best federation in the world, personally. But it's not about the top 1%. It's really about the bottom 90%. If you look at any federation, right, that you really have to take into consideration. I think that a lot of the guys in the USAPL, personally, almost, with for no reason, not being super strong or not having records or anything like that, but just because they're in the USAPL, just because they're in the IPF, almost there's like a little chip on their shoulder, right? But I did it on a stiff bar. Oh, but I did it in the USAPL, right? Whatever it is. Well, if you go to the USPA, right, and look at the bottom 90%, or I know what just happened with the USPA, but USPA maybe before 2 months ago, or WRPF, people are just looking to be strong. It's a lot more humble. It's a lot more guys who are really trying to just they're not worried about the $300 SBD belt. They're worried about the $300 knee sleeves. They're just trying to get strong, right? And at least that's my experience bouncing around from local USAPL meet, to local USPA meet, and handling at these things. It's like an entirely different culture and the kind of ball game that goes around it. And then at the top in the USAPL, people are fighting for positions. People aren't going really balls to the wall for the most part, right? It's, oh, I want to get second at Nats or first at Nats, blah, blah, blah. On the untested side, which is my favorite thing in the world. It's what got me into powerlifting. It's, when I was watching you, Yuri, and Dan compete live as juniors, that's what got me into powerlifting. These guys are gunning for records. These guys don't care who comes first, second. These guys want to be the strongest guys that have ever lived, and pick things up off the ground and squat things and bench things that nobody has ever done. That pursuit of absolute power, that's what's attractive to me. And the honesty behind it is actually, I feel like, a super underrated portion of it. Where people are, that's why there's no money in sport, is because of how honest powerlifting is on the untested side. The strongest guys, right? They're not going to get sponsored by SBD. They're not going to get these sponsorships that a lot of guys on the tested side get, because they're open about what they take. And, it might be taboo, but everybody in every sport takes steroids. I specifically know guys that change, molecular structures of steroids and give things to people in the NFL, give people, in the MLB, NBA. It's everywhere. But we're like one of maybe 2 or 3 sports that openly accept the fact that people take steroids and talk about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know, like, look at CrossFit. It's completely hidden. No one talks about it. We all know they're doing it. You can just look at them and know they're doing it. And yet they never talk about it. But in powerlifting, there has been more of a wave of transparency with it. And I think that would make it tough to monetize it, because it's going to turn off major corporations and stuff where the money would come from. I thought it was interesting, though, you said the 90-10 thing, and that makes so much sense. That's a great way of phrasing it, to where everyone is so focused on the top 10% of lifters, because that's what you see on IG. Like, you're one of them. You're in that 10%. You're at the top 10%. Guys see you. They see all these other guys who are freaks blowing up huge numbers, and they get almost deterred. They get turned off to where they're like, man, I'm never going to be at that level. It's demoralizing. But it's like, that's the 10%. That's not the 90%. Most people fall within the 90%, but they get so caught up in the 10% that they just, it burns them out. It makes them feel worse about themselves. I mean, do you ever feel like that with yourself? Do you see people who are even like stronger than you, and you're like, man, like, I want to get to that point, but that guy's at such a high level. Am I ever going to get there?
Absolutely. But, by the same token, I really try to put things in perspective, right? And understand, all factors, right? From a purely like vanity standpoint and just Instagram, of course I do, right? The same reason, like, so many people say, oh my God, 700-pound deadlift is the new 800-pound deadlift, 800-pound deadlifter, like, now there's so many of these. And I'm like, you guys, I know you might see 10 of them when you open Instagram today, but that's because you're following the same 10 dudes that do this all the time. Go ahead and do yourself a favor. Look at open powerlifting, right? Look at how few guys are picking up 800 plus pounds off the ground. Yes, it's way more common than it may have been 10 years ago, but that's also because the talent pool of the sport has increased. There's so many more people doing raw powerlifting now. But I feel like people think raw powerlifting has been around for like 30, 40 years. It really only started picking up mid like 2000, like 2005, 2006, really transitioning, and getting legitimized from suits and from like APF and all this stuff. It's easy to get discouraged, but I'm young, right? I'm 22, and I happen to be in a fortunate spot where I know what a lot of these guys are doing, and the cards these guys may be pulling on the untested side of things, drugs wise, and knowing that it's a 10-year sport, not a 1 or 2 year sport, which is what Instagram is really encouraging, right? There are so many people now, strong guys, really strong guys, who blow up on social media and might get sponsorships and might be starting to get paid off of their strength and what they're posting. And then it's dangerous because they attach their training to Instagram, right? Oh my God, I don't have a post today. Let me go deadlift this, right? To get something huge on Instagram. That's how you end up in the sport for 2 years and never find out your real potential. Humans peak in their strength late 20s, early 30s. I'm definitely gonna make it there to find out. So I'm not exactly too worried about where I'm at the moment, knowing that I don't really want to be pulling all of these cards that a lot of these other guys are pulling as young as I am. But just having faith that knowing maximizing and trying to do what I do right now, and later, maybe pulling those cards, that I will end up exactly right there, and hopefully be one of those guys that encourages other people to get into the sport, but might be discouraging from a strength viewpoint.
Well, how long have you been lifting?
Lifting or like competing, like powerlifting specific?
Well, I saw your open powerlifting. It's been about 2 years you've been competing, but what about
Yep.
just lifting in general?
Oh, since I was 10.
Was it
Maybe
for
since.
athletics?
Yeah, I did martial arts my whole life, and that's really it. I fought older and a little bit heavier in those younger kind of stuff, so it just had to be kind of bigger, stronger.
Okay. So you have quite a history of lifting then, but powerlifting you're fairly new to. Like, why did you decide to go to the USPA, that side of things, instead of going like USAPL?
So
Right
it's
off the
actually
bat.
my first coach. I signed up for a USAPL meet, my first meet, and my coach DM me. He's like, "Listen, at the time I really didn't have. I mean, I still don't have a bench, but at the time I really didn't have a bench, and the squat was okay, low fives, whatever it was. But the deadlift, I always had a pretty high capacity for the deadlift. It was just naturally something that I had a good affinity to. And he's like, listen, you're going to have more fun as fed. You want to be on a deadlift bar. It doesn't matter, no matter what anybody tells you, you can do whatever you want. And I think you're going to have more fun here. There's going to be maybe what he specifically said, which I don't find true, to be honest, at this point, is you're going to have slightly lower judging standards. It's going to be a less serious vibe. And you're going to get to pull on the deadlift bar and really maximize your total. And I think the deadlift bar and really maximize your total, and maybe the vibe a little bit of those local meets at in the untested are a lot better. If you want to talk about nationals and other things like that, USAPL, I'd give it all day. I think USAPL Nats, CNATs, Junior Nats, whatever, Mega Nats is all some of the best powerlifting meets ever run. But at a local level, I'll take any untested meet by like a million.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and one thing I saw too was like when I was looking at your competition history, your bench in about 2 years has gone up like 100 pounds. So I actually think this is a good thing to look at, because a lot of guys look at the strongest benchers and say, what are they doing? But if it comes naturally to them, it might not be as good of an example as someone who struggles with it, who actually progresses it to a large degree. So even you going from like 300 to 400 is a massive jump, to where it's obvious that you weren't great at bench initially, but you've made some big gains on it. What do you think are the things that have helped you the most?
So for me, bench, I mean, I have thrown just about everything at the wall. You know what I mean? And had very few things stick, but those things that stuck really, really stuck. So I used to be kind of one of those, max grip dudes who was like, hey, I'm built for the deadlift. Let me try and play to this end range leverage and remedy this ridiculous range of motion that I'm forced to have. And then I ended up tearing my labrum on my left side with a buddy, Brandon Striegel by chance.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, animal, one of the best dudes around. But also super, super strong. Or doing something really stupid, and continued trying to play this, this end range game. And was like, what will happen if after the American Pro this summer, I came in hoping for like a 400-pound bench and almost made I mean, I put 2.5 kilos on the bench from 7 months prior. I competed in December and bench 364, and then I came into the American Pro hoping to bench like 402, 407, and ended up benching 369, and was like, all right, I'm doing something wrong here. Like, what's going on? I was like, what if I just try and bring my grip in, right? Super close grip. And instead of trying to play, all this tech stuff, what if I just try to get really strong? Like try to really hammer triceps. I ate for like 5.5, 6 months. I ate between 7.9 and 8.1 K calories. And I know that claim sounds ridiculous, but it's true. And, anybody that knows me during that time really knows that I did, and just really hammered triceps and focused far less on anything besides raw strength, which, at the end of the day, if you look at any of the best benchers, right, you want to look at deadlifting, sure, very, very tech dependent. And yes, very power dependent, but very tech dependent. Same thing with squat, very power dependent, but very tech dependent. There's a lot of really strong benchers around who are not power lifters, who are just big dudes. They're just strong guys. You know, it's the one thing where it's not your whole body's not involved. If you can kind of get a little bit more of those rowy muscles, you know, those showy arms and shoulders, and rely less on the whole super low ROM, soft touch, ridiculous arch kind of thing, you're probably going to end up in a better spot. There's very few guys that works for, I feel like, in the first place. And I feel like the last card that anybody wants to pull is actually getting stronger as a disadvantaged, like bencher,
Yeah, you have a pretty narrow grip from what I've seen, but it actually suits your body type. And I think a lot of people have the misconception that just because they go wider, they reduce the range of motion, they're going to be stronger. But from what I've seen, most guys actually do better with a more intermediate to close grip. You get more speed off the chest. Now, how many days a week are you typically benching?
3 as of right now, and 1 accessory day on Tuesday, some dumbbell bench and things like that, maybe some overhead press, super close grip. But it's really only 3. I've brought it up to 4 before, and I managed it. And when I was at a far lighter body weight, I did 5, and I managed it for maybe a week before I thought my shoulders were going to fall off my body. But the 4 worked when I was like a worse bencher. I feel like as you get stronger, you can maybe not handle less, but handle less frequency, and maybe more volume on those fewer days is what's going to benefit you more, and just really focusing on recovering, doing a lot of damage at once, and then really focus on recovering than that, instead of kind of maybe picking a scab every time you go in there. It's going to be different, even if the percentage is the same. If 365 is your percentage versus 585 is your percentage, 70%. That's going to be very different on the CNS and just structurally, tendons and joints. So as you get stronger, you just kind of got to auto regulate with stuff. I'm nowhere near that, on bench. I can still handle quite a bit. I'm not. It's weird. It's the first time in my life I don't have a bad bench. Low 4 is not too bad, but it's it only feels like that when getting invited to these 3-4 meets, untested meets. You go in and it's like, oh, John Hack, like, nice. 600-pound bench. It's different. It's humbling.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you said you gained, or I was wondering how much weight you gained when you were eating that 6 to 7 months, eating 7 to 8,000 calories a day. What was the weight gain like?
Quite a bit. So I tried to keep the fats as moderate as possible, and really try to keep it to simple carbs. So fortunately it wasn't poor composition, but I went from 214 to 240, or right at 240, like 239, 240. Wow. Which was the first time that was kind of the plan with my coach was, hey, we really need to get this squat and bench up, because at this next American Pro here, I'm going to really try to take a run at 2K. And I'm like, this, I can get the dead up there. I know that it kind of carries, but I need the squat and bench to be in a more justifiable spot. Like, I don't need to pull 920 to total 2K. Like, I got to figure this out, So just tried to bring the bench up to 4 and the squat up to 300 keys. And I knew the deadlift would take a pretty big hit, position wise, but I was like, hey, this is at some point in my career, I'm going to have to gain some mass and, really do what needs to be done to get the squat and bench up there, and I'll just eat it for this meet. And then did. And now I'm just best trying to maintain that. I'm already back down to 226, 227, and the bench weirdly has seemed to stick around, and the squat is pretty close to there as well. And now with the positioning being a lot more advantageous for deadlifts, especially with my more externally rotated high torso angle, type of pull, hopefully things come together.
Well, I think a lot of people focus too much on staying light, and that inhibits their strength gains. Like, if you try to gain weight, or if you let your body kind of go where it naturally wants to by eating enough, that's going to be one of the biggest things to help you get stronger. But a lot of guys just want to be like, I want to stay at a super lightweight class and keep pushing it. And it's just going to limit you. That's what I see all the time.
Yeah, or the winter bulkers and the summer cutters. It's like, dude, you're not gaining enough mass in your 3 months of winter for you to cut down and look any different. You're bulking and cutting the same 10 pounds. If you think about it as a career over 10 to 15 years in the sport, what are you doing trying to cut yourself when you're 18 years old, 19 years old? You should be doing absolutely nothing but gaining as much. I don't want it from a bodybuilding standpoint. It's kind of the Dan Green ideology, right? Before you get super specific and really dial into certain leverages and worry about tech, just get big and get strong. And, You can't carve a rock out of a pebble, but you can carve a rock out of a boulder, and you're going to have a lot easier time accumulating a bunch of mass and accumulating a bunch of general strength and then sharpening that down instead of from nothing trying to, create this super sharp, blade. It's just not going to work.
And were you 240 going into that last meet? And I know you weighed in, you made the 220 class, so you do a pretty big weight cut.
That was my first weight cut ever, actually. And
Okay.
it was I went from 237 down to 220, and went, pretty hard at it, did the whole gut cut thing, did the, whatever 10-day protocol. And it went very smoothly. I was lucky enough to have a lot of people in my corner to, ask, who had been super experienced with it. So I'm glad everything went well, but it did affect things. I knew it would affect things. I didn't think it would affect things as much as it did. Only in terms of an endurance standpoint, I felt great coming up on squat. And any time that I'd failed a third attempt squat, not that I'd really pushed it at any meet, but anytime that I'd failed it, I knew, going into the hole, I was like, this isn't going to happen. And was like, all right, you guys take this from me, and go up together. But I didn't really fight with anything. That 300 kilo at this last meet that I did, I was like, I'm getting this. This is, great. And I fought with it as hard as I could. And coming off, that was the first time at any meet failing any attempt where I was like, wow, that took it out of me. I have no idea what I have, for the rest of this. Let's just have fun. But the 24-hour weigh-in thing, really playing with that weight stuff is tough. It's nothing that I really want to do. But then again, I'm competing. I go to the American Pro and I'm competing against two guys who weigh 260 plus pounds on the platform, Joe Sullivan and Demarius Slocum. And it's like, all right, if you guys are cutting 45 pounds, what the hell am I supposed to do? You guys are next level. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I've seen Demarius. He is huge. I met him about a little over a year ago. I was like, how are you competing in the same weight class as me? Because at that time, I looked like this skinny, lanky 220, obviously, being off PEDs and stuff. And he was just huge. I'm like, this is not even, you look easily a weight class above me right now. So that's pretty funny you say that. No, I think too, like, guys don't realize if you do those big weight cuts, like, people, the general public, you have to do IVs. If you don't do IVs, you're going to feel like trash. You're not going to be able to get the water back on quick enough. So IV replenishment after the weigh-ins is how you can cut those massive weights and come back to near strength. I won't say you're not at all inhibited, but the biggest thing I noticed back in the day, because IVs weren't quite as popular or common back then in the 2010 to 2015 period. So I would
Really? I
literally,
didn't know that. Okay.
yeah, I would literally, I mean, Dan Green was doing it. There were some guys who were doing it, but I would literally try to drink back like 15 pounds. It was crazy.
God damn.
I could
That's
do it. It was
insane.
miserable though. Yeah. And I noticed the next day at the meet, you'd have kind of the shaky quad thing, shaky legs on squats. So that was where you'd really feel it. But IVs are just a game changer.
Yeah, see, IVs and the way that a lot of people are to do this now and how meticulous people are starting to be about the recomping portion. Everybody's always been very dialed in terms of getting down there. The water loading protocol and ditching, everything, sodium, fiber, everything's been super calculated. But the recomp process has like taken off, especially on the untested side. I see guys as soon as they weigh in, I'm not going to, name anybody, but as soon as they come out, right, it's whatever, it's 2 shots of insulin, a shot of growth, and then they're going in and getting whatever, 3-4 bags of IVs with Toradol in it so that they don't feel any of the pains that they're supposed to feel the next day. But then this insulin, that's what people are it's kind of the taboo, what people don't want to talk about on the untested side of powerlifting. A lot less on the untested side, but really bodybuilding, nobody wants to talk about this, strongman, but it is what the top dudes are using to just be like those guys where you're like, you don't look like a human, you look more like an animal kind of thing, when you're in that super dehydrated state and just suck down no glucose, no glycogen, your body, initially might not really be so receptive to you jamming Denny's, down your throat the second you finish up, So you giving it some insulin, especially when you've been riding this ridiculous, monotonous glycemic index for 24, 48 hours, probably closer to a week. If you're doing a gut cut and keeping the fiber down, you're not, having any sugar for the week, and then you just jam it full of all this stuff. That insulin, really forcing those calories to go where you want them to is really how a lot of these guys are just immediately, within a few hours putting 20 pounds back on. And then throughout the day, it's not getting bloat and it's not just holding a bunch of water. It's really going where they need it to. So I feel like that's something I didn't know, that IVs, I always assumed IVs were like a necessity. In terms of even, whatever, 10 years ago, but I know how ridiculous it's gotten, with, the sure super supplementation, and even on a micronutrient standpoint, vitamins people are taking the second this stuff ends. It's if you're cutting 40 pounds body weight, like, I don't know what regardless of getting that out, to put that back on, you have to put 40 pounds of things in you. Like, what are you doing? How can you do that the day before a meet? I have no idea.
Yeah, Dan Green was the first guy I heard of who cut massive amounts of weight to make 220, because I want to say he was 260 and he would cut to 220. And I had heard of guys doing that, and it blew my mind that was even possible. Now, you said, so they would take like insulin, GH, and a pain medication as well?
Yeah, so what's really common in a lot of the IVs now is people put Toradol in them, which I didn't even know what that was. And then at my last meet, I got IVs. I actually work for an IV company. And they're like, "Do you want Toradol?" And I was like, I want saline. I want water. Mm-hmm. I'm like dehydrated. And they're like, no, you want Toradol. I was like, what the hell is Toradol? And I'm, asking around, and every other guy in the room is like, "You want Toradol?" And I'm like, what is going on right now? Because it's some weird, like, culty thing. It's apparently this painkiller that, like, the next day you don't feel anything, which is very interesting.
Well, I've heard of I think it's like tramadol, but Toradol, okay. I've never heard of this one. So it's an anti-inflammatory drug. It's an NSAID for pain. Huh. I didn't, yeah, like you've heard of, I think it's like tramadol, isn't that
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This is apparently easier, and I think the reason that it hasn't been maybe as popular, and it makes sense with the IV thing, I'm not 100% sure about it, but I'm pretty sure that the oral administration of Toradol is not very bioavailable, so it's something that would be far more effective if administered through an IV, like straight to the vein kind of thing. So maybe that's why, but I know, I don't know about how it was in the past, but at least right now, that is like all these dudes, it's apparently a given that it's being put in their stuff. And especially at the top level, these guys are like cocktailing their IVs, NAD, BCAAs, all this stuff. They're getting very fancy with this stuff. Very fancy.
NAD IVs after weigh-in. Wow. That's pretty cool.
So yeah, it's insane. There's right, all the stuff, on a cellular level, what that's doing, especially after something like a fast. It's legitimate performance enhancing, in my opinion.
Does everyone, because back at the bigger meets I used to do, everybody would be in the bathroom like pinning suspensions and stuff. Does that still go on? Obviously, is that a thing?
Dude, it's happening like in the back room, like not even in the bathroom. Like my coach came for, and I will say the past 2 years, maybe 1 year, really, the last full year of competition, there was way less of that. It was way cleaner. Just the meets overall on the untested side just seemed like a way cleaner, more well put together thing. But the year beforehand at the showdown, I'll never forget it, because my coach, Rondell from Trinidad, came over, and it was his first untested meet that he was handling at. I was helping handle Brandon, and we were handling Jamal at the showdown. That one where Jamal and Danny both missed 1,000, that like fell over, and that thing. And we walked in, and the first thing we saw, Rondell had never been to an untested meet, was this guy. He had one needle. I still don't know who he is, and it's bothered me. I've tried to find out for so long. One guy with a needle in his right ass cheek, and his girlfriend with a needle in his left ass cheek, just standing in the middle of the venue. And I looked at it, and I was like, "Ron, I swear, bro, it's not like this." And he's like, "Okay, bro." Like, it was crazy. And it was super eye-opening. My first time at a big untested meet, it was definitely a little bit of a slap in the face, because I grew up, right, like guys like you, like idolizing guys like you. And specific, I mean, when I was young, I didn't know the reality of anything. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, these guys don't, take anything, whatever it is. And then when I came to the first untested meet, I was like, oh wow, these guys, I'm in the warm-up room and I'm handling here. This is how the cookie, this is how the sausage is made. That's insane. Some of the things people are doing is, I don't know.
Why do you think everyone's always saying no one wants to talk about Tren? Like, I feel like everyone has to be taking it. That's what gets you to the top.
Dude, everybody see. So this is what I was talking with a buddy who's here down in Houston, and he is so strong. I mean, world record holding strong and young. And he dabbles, he takes some Tren. And I'm like, dude, like why are you pulling this card, this young, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, it doesn't matter, dude. He's like, there is literally nobody that, doesn't take Tren. I know maybe 5 guys that get invited, these top 40 meets that don't like take this stuff, but then again, at the very, very top, like John doesn't take this stuff. John doesn't, say he takes this stuff. Certain things work for certain people, and I know certain people that, like specifically with Tren, the negative side effects really outweigh the positives, no matter how positive the positives are, in terms of strength, like what it does to other areas of life. So, I don't want to say everybody's on Tren, but yes, it's clearly, if it works for somebody, they hold on to that card forever. That's their thing. As soon as it comes to prep, boom, Tren comes in, and then they, whatever, gain 150 pounds on their total in a week, that you're watching this stuff. And it's like, what is going on?
Yeah, no, I definitely, I saw a lot of use of it. I used it a lot. It was one of the backbones of, performing at the top level. So
Really?
getting very accustomed to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
See, but that's what I'd expect.
yeah, I'd say it's just people don't want to own up to that. But one thing I want to circle back to. So this diet, when you were eating all this food, you were eating 7,000 to 8,000 calories a day. What did that look like?
So for me, I eat the same thing every day. And I knew that with, trying to do something that aggressive, I'm going to be gaining weight rapidly, and it better be coming from, at the very least, super bioavailable, just clean sources. So all the carbs were pretty much coming from were whatever 2 slices of bread in the morning, and there was some intra carbs like carboline and dextrose, like intra workout. But aside from that, it was all white rice and sweet potato. Everything else was ground turkey, ground beef, and then a steak, and then a bunch of eggs and egg whites. But that's like, I mean, pretty much it. It was super boring stuff. There were a few sauces that would add, like, some carbs on there, but it was eating, 6 times a day. And that was, I mean, as much as I want to say it was a great thing, it was definitely also a relatively darker time, like trying to gain that much weight and spending that much time solely eating on top of how much time you train. It's, it can be a darker time. You don't see people, you don't do anything. You're in your little hole, and you're eating your food. That's it. And you just tell yourself this is what you got to do to get to where you want to be. But sometimes it's tougher to go through that for, like, 5.5, 6 months of just shoving your face, same thing every day. But the monotonous nature of powerlifting and the recovery aspect of it, I think, is one of the coolest parts. It's the only sport. It's not flashy. There's no monetary incentive to get into the sport. The only reason you're here is because you love it and you're passionate about it. And it's not rocket science. It's pretty clear cut how to get strong and what to do. It's the only thing you can't really finagle or like finesse. If you do it, you get what you want out of it. If you don't, you don't. Which I think is one of my favorite parts.
Well, how many hours a day are you putting in training wise?
So I guess depends on the day. I guess the shortest would probably, whatever, hour 15. On the longer side, it does get, pretty long. It could be, around 5-ish, 6 hours, which is quite a bit. But those are really the long, I'd say average, maybe 3 hours ish, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. I think when you're at a higher level, warming up to those weights, taking longer between sets and everything, that's fairly common, because even Chance Mitchell has talked about that, where he'll have these SBD days that are marathon sessions where he's in the gym 6 hours. So I think that is pretty common at that level. I mean, is that kind of what it takes to get to that level? Do you have to be willing to put in that much time in the gym?
I mean, that's like the bare minimum. I feel like, you know what I mean? You know as well as I do that the vast majority of it isn't in the gym. It's really outside of the gym. The training's really like the really fun part. Like you get to go in and be rewarded for how well you recovered. And of course, this is only when you are on your stuff. When you're off your stuff, of course, like it sucks. You go in the gym and you feel weak and whatever, but it's really everything's made outside the gym. It's all sleep, it's all food, it's all the mobility you do, it's all the going to the chiropractor, going to the get acupuncture, whatever it is when you're playing maximal loads. Yes, like bodybuilding would be the most like it, where it's really just do damage and then recover so that you gain mass. But all it is just adaptation. You're just doing damage and then you just have to recover. And getting strong is all about the recovery aspect of it just as much as it is the doing damage aspect. If you're not willing to spend a few hours in the gym every day, you're definitely not going to, be taking world records or anything like that. You can be strong, but I don't know about, top competitive.
So yeah, you eat, sleep, live powerlifting. Does that leave time for other things, or does it feel like you're so honed in on powerlifting that everything else is just kind of background noise?
See, like as unfortunate as it is, because I do think the vast majority of people need to be balanced. It's good to have balance, and you need to have other things. And I think that there are definitely times in life where you have to be um, balanced. But by the same token, nobody that's taken a world record in powerlifting lived a balanced lifestyle. Nobody that won a championship in the NBA or whatever it is, whatever sport you want to go to, the extremes. The people who do extreme things live extreme lifestyles and have to extremely focus on what they're doing. So you hear so much balance this, balance that, and that's super important and healthy for the majority. But if you're trying to be in the minority, you probably have to do what the minority before you did. If I look at any of the people who came before me, specifically in my weight class, the deadlift that I'm chasing down, Kaylor's thing, exactly the way Kaylor lived. It's a very different thing, and to a certain extent, you have to mimic, what these guys have done to do things that nobody's ever done.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I was listening yesterday to Dan Paschalk, my old training partner, talking to Dave Tate on his podcast, and he was talking about John and I's training because he's been around both of us, and he said like that's basically how it was. It was 100% do whatever it takes. This was the sole focus of our lives. That's what we were focused on. There wasn't balance. In my 20s, that was all I focused on. There wasn't anything else really. And that led to the detriment of certain things, relationships and everything else kind of got cast aside. But it's also what led me to the point where I got to with the 2100 total, because it was just all in. That's everything I did revolved around how to get stronger. So I totally agree with you where it's like to get to that level, to get to these extreme elite levels, you have to be all in. There has to be a lack of balance. But at the same time, from the majority of people, it's probably better to have that. So I get both sides of it. It's like, how serious do you want to take this? Because there's consequences. I mean, you're going to have things that come up to where your life will be in some degree of disarray in a sense, because you're so honed in on this. Like everything's powerlifting all the time. And honestly, I enjoyed that phase of my life, but I wouldn't enjoy it anymore. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like I've done it. My 20s.
Nothing you take back.
Yeah, but in my 30s now, I'm like, I could not live like that. I wouldn't want to live like that. Now I actually do want to enjoy other things. So it's there's phases for it. You're at a good
See, and
point.
that's something I feel like you almost more than anybody have done such a good job of putting that message out there. Specifically, the washer and dryer behind you, right? I literally used to deadlift with those washers and dryers behind me, like those pictures, the same way you have it set up there. I had those printed out behind me. Still, I swear to God, that going from somewhere like that and really understanding, I feel like so many people initially, right when you started posting videos like that, it was so relatable. You know what I mean? It was like, oh my God, this guy's in his basement ripping stuff around. This is what I do. You know what I mean? And seeing, now coming out of that and out of that entire kind of phase, that super hyper focused phase. And I guess initially you had more of that like rage or, kind of whatever, take it out on the weight kind of thing. And then slowly evolved into, okay, like I'm going to be super technical about stuff. And, and then now looking at it for, in retrospect, competing, which I think is a really cool thing. To actually be competing, knowing, hey, I'm not on PEDs, I'm not going to best 2100, but I love this sport. And I'm realistic about expectations, and that self-awareness standpoint, I feel like is the biggest thing when you're talking about like certain people should be balanced and certain people shouldn't be, or you can't be. I feel like the self-awareness aspect of that is really the only thing that now is really far less common. I feel like people now feel like they're doing, do more minimal work. They do go to the gym every day, which is amazing. And, they eat their 2 or 3 square meals a day, but they think that's going to make them a world champion. You know what I mean? Or make them a world record holder. And that, it's simply not the case. It's cool to go in there and be like, I want to do this because I want to be as strong as I can be and maybe win this local meet amongst my gym and amongst blah, blah, blah. But I feel like now there are a lot of people who feel, maybe more entitled to things than they should be in terms of records or in terms of social media attention and things like that, just for kind of doing the bare minimum for, oh, I count my macros. Oh, I got to go to the gym. But there's definitely, a very small group of people, I would say, that really should be living that kind of lifestyle. And if they even were to live that lifestyle, will end up being, kind of those world record holding type of strength. I don't think it's in the cards for me exactly, even on anything but deadlift. Looking at what guys are doing now, Joe Sullivan squats 850 pounds. I'm not built. I will never squat 8. That's one thing I promise. Like I can, hand to God now, I will never squat 850 pounds because I will never. I mean, number one, Joe is Joe, right? But I will never. I know what I would have to do to even what I would have to take to maybe even kind of do that. I'll never bench 600 pounds. That's okay with me. I'll really try my best to bench 500 pounds at some point in my day, maybe low 5. That'd be the coolest thing in the world to me. The deadlift is the one thing where I can objectively look at it and see, kind of the guys where they're at now, looking at where they were at when they were my age and juniors, where I'm, besides Kaler, the strongest there. And I can be like, hey, I can see this path for myself. If I really do stick to this and really do hyper focus, kind of maybe not living the most balanced lifestyle, I'll probably end up where I'm looking to go. And I feel like that honesty with yourself is something that is underrated at this point.
Yeah, that's very relatable. I felt the same way at the time because, like Boss of Bosses, when that meet was still going on, I was the strongest deadlifter outside of Yuri, right? And then Kaler came along the next year, and obviously him and Yuri were ahead of me. But, I was still at that top level deadlift, and I felt the same way. I'm like,
You were insane.
Yeah, I could be up here on deadlift, but obviously squat and bench, I was like, it's probably not going to be there. My squat was good. It was, 772, but
That
it wasn't.
771 is awesome.
Yeah, it was. So it was a high level, but I knew deadlift was the lift where it was going to be pushed to the higher level. Obviously, bench was never going to be there. Kind of similar feelings, but I agree too with for some people, most people, you're a hobbyist lifter. You're going to be a hobbyist lifter, and then there's the other people who they make it their life, and that's a very few subset of people. But that's what it takes. Like some people make it their life, and that's everything. And most people are hobbyists where they lift, they take it serious. Obviously, I'm not saying that, but it's not their entire life. And that's almost what it takes for people to get to the level that you've seen. I mean, even for you, like, what's your ultimate goal then in the sport?
So the only tangible goal, because ideally it's just the truth of it is really milk as much as I can out of this body. Like I want to know how strong I can be. I'm very I guess you'd call it obsessed with the idea of absolute power. Like I want to know what I can do, but the only tangible goal I have is Kaler's deadlift, which is like an insane goal. You know what I mean? But aim high, miss high. Let's say, I'm genuinely gunning for that. I do believe full heartedly that I will take that at some point. He did it at 23 years old. Ridiculous. I don't think I'm prepared to do what he did and the way he went about things. To do it that way, but hey, late 20s, whatever it is, I fully think I will take that. It's that mid 9s, that 948-ish pole. He did 953 in the opening. Christoph did, I think, 959 or something like that. But that's really the only tangible goal I have. Aside from that, I just want to see what I got. I've always been. It's something I never watched football. I like that. I'd turn it on with friends. I never watched basketball. Or any other sports really from when I was like 13, 14 years old. I just followed powerlifting. That was like my whole thing, So I don't know. There's definitely an idolization standpoint of it, or like a heroes kind of thing. But it's very cool, I think, in powerlifting, and very unique as a sport, where guys who I was 12, 13 years old, idolizing these guys, and now I happen to be friends with so many of them because that you're only these guys who were so good, they were 21, and now I'm 22, and these guys are like 29, 30. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we can sit here and have this conversation. You know what I mean? When I was 13, 14, watching whatever it was, Dan Green, Yuri, Joe, I was just having this conversation with, specifically Joe Sullivan. I remember when he moved to Ohio and Elite FTS, we were talking about all this stuff, and I realized, I'm like, wow, you had no idea who I was at that point. Like, I was just watching you on YouTube. It's a pretty surreal, cool thing that's pretty unique to the sport with how small the talent pool is.
Yeah, and it'll get to a point even for you where you'll be like, wow, I'm the old guy now. That comes around
Oh, for
eventually.
sure.
That's where I'm at now. And like Kevin O, Kaler, all these guys are kind of at the point of almost retiring. Like, I don't even know if we'll see Kaler or Kevin compete again. And I'm in the same boat. We're all in our 30s now. I don't know if Kaler's quite in his 30s, but he's up there. And it's kind of wild because these were the young bucks. We were all young bucks coming up, looking up to the Dan Greens, the Brandon Lillies. And now we're sitting in that same position where it's all you young guys coming up. And now we're kind of at the end of the line. So it's interesting how that, time waits for no man. It comes for everybody. And
Yeah.
even you'll be at that point. At some point, it'll be a while,
But it's quick. That's what I'm saying. It's quick in our sport. You know what I mean? It's 10 years, which feels so long because, it's not basketball where you're playing your heart out every second. And it's tangible, right? It's like you can lift these numbers now, and in 10 years, it might be so far away from what you could lift in 10 years, but it's a quick 10 years. And I feel like you know that as good as anybody. Like you're saying, it happens quickly. It takes a long time, but it happens super quick. And it's something that you just have to do, I feel like, almost with grace, and have to really be cool with the idea of you've accomplished what you've accomplished. Like that's my whole thing. It's like, I know I only have a certain amount of time, which is why I'm okay with being hyper focused and maybe making those sacrifices. I can't do this ever again. If I started to do this at 30 years old and be hyper focused, I'm not going to peak at 40 like I'm going to peak at 29. So if I really put my time in for this, I'll be able to say forever, I held a world record. You'll be able to say forever, you totaled 2,100 pounds, right? And pulled these things and did these things that we're just not. I feel like with the real people that come up too, below you, something that's really cool in our sport is kind of that idolization thing, and maybe that paying homage, right? Like, I don't care if I ever out deadlift you. Like, you'll always be you. Kaler will always be Kaler. It doesn't matter. Like, and to the people before me, I'll always be me. You don't think in 10 years there's going to be a kid who can rip what I rip off the ground for 10? You know what I mean? The way things are going at this point. But I'm sure that kid will say, I still started because of me. And I can say, I still started because of you. And you can say, you still started because of Dan, whatever it is. And I think it's really cool that way. It's just, you kind of, you don't want to burn the candle at both ends, and really try and, I know some guys that take a bunch of stuff, where I'm like, hey, you're not going to best, you're like almost 50 years old. It's not going to, you set that total when you were like 31, 32, but it's cool to do it for a, love of the sport thing. But when people start really kind of playing with their health for it, is when I'm like, hey, maybe a little bit, little overkill for me, in terms of the PED I'm talking about, not the, not the competing thing.
yeah, I mean, I redlined it all the time in my 20s, but I got to the point where I realized, 29, 30 years old, I'm like, all right, it's time to pull back and focus on health. And obviously that comes with the downsides of your strength is going to go down, because it's almost like these are two incongruent goals. If you're really trying to focus on being as healthy as you can, it opposes strength. Like, even if you're not taking PEDs, just getting heavier, your blood pressure is going to go up, your heart rate's going to go up, your resting heart rate, you're going to be in worse shape. It's like if you start doing a bunch of cardio, you get weaker. It's the same kind of thing. So they're really opposing goals. But like you said, I'm at peace with what I've done, and I'm at peace with where I'm at now. So I can kind of focus on the health side of things and be like, okay, I did that, and I'm okay. And I'm okay watching you guys do it. And if all you guys, beat my numbers, it's fine with me. It's like you said, you've established your own past. You don't need to. It's not discredited because people are hitting massive numbers now, and it'll be that same way for you. So,
That's exactly it. Like if for the next 10 years or 15 years, you were redlining the way you were in your 20s, maybe, I mean, maybe right now, right? Like early 30s, maybe you might be able to, best that 2100, but 45 years old doing it like you were in your 20s, you're probably not going to beat your 29-year-old self. You know what I mean? Which I feel I genuinely couldn't see a better path than the way that you've taken things. Like it's a very admirable thing. And it's something I've thought about, many times that I'd very much like to somewhat emulate, because I know, I mean, I love powerlifting. Like I'll be competing past when I'm, going to be able to best my best total. But it's just having that self-awareness and being like, hey, I'm doing this because I love it. And, this is just awesome. And that's why I'm not doing it to be, the hero and, anymore. I'm trying to really take my stuff. And that's what allows you to now have that balanced lifestyle. You're powerlifting, you're you, but powerlifting more balanced, and it's great. It's a part of your life, not the whole life anymore. And I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to take that step back and have that self-awareness instead of kind of getting lost in that rabbit hole that I feel like you've seen so many people, go down, and not really come out of as much and kind of lose more of their life than they'd like to it.
Yeah, and I just say right now, with all the traveling, all the people you meet, all the events, fun opportunities, just soak it all in, because I look back on that stuff and I'm like, wow, that was crazy. All those trips, all the opportunities, all the meets, and it's not there now, but just having that to look back on is pretty cool, and enjoy it while you can. Enjoy the moment. Just try to be present in everything you come across right now. That's the main advice I would give. Now, what's your favorite memory in powerlifting so far? What's the coolest thing you've done?
Oh
Coolest
man.
experience?
So that's okay. So that's pretty tough. But I might say my first big untested meet, like in terms of my personal achievements, that's its own thing. But I'll never forget. It was hybrid 2 years ago. The Brandon was competing. It's the meet where Dan Bell totaled the 2600. It's where John Hack had a huge. I think it was his first. Maybe it was the first meet he took Kaler's. Oh no, he took Kaler's pull at the showdown with that 887 and the 198. I don't know. John had a huge performance. Everybody. It was the first time where I saw basically all my superheroes in the same place. I walked in. First person I saw was Stan Efferding. Saw Julius Maddox bench my deadlift at 6 in the warm up room, and I was just like, "What is going on?" It was the craziest thing ever, and I was handling, right. I wasn't spectating, so I kind of was like trying to act cool, you know what I mean, or trying to be cool, but I was like half fangirling. I was like, "What the hell is going on? These are all the people I've been around forever," and it was crazy. Like watching Dan Bell total 2,600 pounds might be that. I watched that in front of my face, and it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. And watching how much, he, the biggest, strongest dude in the room, the second that happened, he started crying and all this stuff. The way, what it meant to everybody in the room to watch Dan do that, and what it meant to Dan just watching it, was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I hope that he, with Jesus doing what he just did, I hope he can, Dan can understand that it doesn't matter. Like we were just talking about, like Dan is Dan. Doesn't matter if anybody picks up more weight than Dan. Dan Bell is numero uno, whatever it is. It's cool. It's really tough though. Handling Jamal just pulled the K. He did, the 2,300. That was awesome. He did the 816 5 a K thing. Even around, I don't know. I've been fortunate enough, like, the kind of soak it up thing. I've been really trying to take that to heart and really trying to do as much as I can in my short time in the sport so far, really trying to bounce around and take advantage of kind of the position I'm in.
No, that's perfect. And I agree. Like Dan Bell, it's still an amazing accomplishment. He might come back and beat, Jesus record now, because he's looking.
I hope so.
It'll be a good battle. Now, how'd you link up with Aaron Horschig, Squat University?
So Aaron is the man. So he, a while back, I can't even remember. I might have shot him a DM. He followed me. He liked some deadlift I did. I don't know, from probably just from a biomechanical standpoint. He was like, "That looks solid." I don't know. And he followed me and DM'd me, and then naturally, as I started getting these aches and pains or whatever, I was like, "Hey, like I'm having a serious issue that for the most part, I've self rehabbed everything, and I have a few things that I won't talk about on Instagram, but things that just don't, I won't talk about on Instagram because it doesn't matter. I can't change them, but just like, even just congenital stuff in my spine, things like that, things that just don't change. That may cause issues, bouncing ideas off of him, online just a little bit, were great. And then it kind of just developed into this like, hey, come see me, and we can film some stuff and take a look at movement. And I was like, that'd be awesome. And he blew me away. My expectations were definitely exceeded. He's an amazing guy.
How far was that drive for me then? Like 4 hours to St. Louis?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Yeah, 4 or 5 hours, something like that, right from Chicago. And I did it on the way down here, anyways, because I drove to Houston because I needed my car. So it helped break things up. It was like 5-6 hours to St. Louis, and then finished the 16-17 hours down here. Which by the time I got here, I felt like I needed another squat university with the. I don't think anything. That's something I'd be curious to also. When you were kind of redlining stuff, or really really pushing stuff, and kind of at peak strength, like things like sitting down for a long period of time, or things like whatever, how much like easier is life, or how much more do you enjoy life? Because things like that are the only things that I think about when I'm in a car for a super long time. That destroys me. Like that, that destroys me. I probably, does it still destroy you?
It's not as bad. Obviously, a long car ride will be a little stiff, but nowhere near what I was. With all the body weight, the heavy lifting constantly, it's not to the same degree at all. I feel so normal now. Like, that's the biggest thing. I feel like a normal person, whereas back then, you do kind of feel like you stand out. You're kind of a freak with the muscle size and all that. You're bigger than everyone. Just feel more normal.
Yeah. I'm not as big as you ever were, or obviously as strong as you ever were, but to a smaller degree, I understand it. And it's like I don't even know. It's very interesting. I've thought about that kind of aspect of whenever I do pull back, just what is everything kind of going to feel like? Just pull back in terms of lifestyle, in terms of, allocating more time to other areas of things. Just what is everything going to feel like? Like I just won't have this wear and tear. I'll have the wear and tear that I did, but not the continuous recovery. It almost feels so stupid walking into an acupuncturist, feeling great, and then you walk in the next day just as bad as when you walked out, but you had a great session, because you walked in feeling fresh. Like walking in, getting work done, and then not doing the damage again. I really, I'm looking forward to that to a certain extent.
Yeah. Now, have you grown up in Chicago your whole life? Have you been there?
Yeah, I was in Chicago up until I was like 4, and then we moved out to a suburb of Chicago called Highland Park, like whatever, 30-40 minutes away. But I didn't know that you were in Wisconsin. Like I said, where in Wisconsin are you, or have you been?
Well, okay, so I was there 23 years. I was in the Madison area. I grew up in a small town about 30 minutes outside of Madison. Lived in Madison for a few years. Went down to Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky for a year, and now I'm in Tennessee, just outside of Knoxville. So I've been in Tennessee now for about 7.5 years. Really like it here. We don't get any snow, which sounds like a good thing, but I do miss it to an extent. But I've been down here a while now, so I got to make it up there one more time in the spring. See my parents.
Wow. There's actually Wisconsin right now. There's a pretty strong crew in Wisconsin right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if John moved back to Wisconsin, right?
Yep.
And then he has 1 or 2 of his buddies. And then do you know Grant Iverson by chance?
I'm not sure. No.
So younger guy, super strong. He was actually just handling Goose as well this weekend. He's with Joey Flex.
Okay.
But super strong kid, super smart kid. He's kind of been around. You'd probably recognize, because I remember just even I think 2018, 2019, there were these viral videos around him as like this super young kid that could bench like 405 for whatever. And I think even this gym that you would probably maybe even just as those small little videos versus actually knowing the person. But they've all been training together, and it made me kind of jealous, because if I was still in Chicago, we kind of talked about getting together, and I even talked to John briefly about training together as well. But if I was still in Chicago, I'd probably make the trip over there, whatever, a few times a week to just go be with some strong buddies. But not that I have any shortage of that down here in Houston.
No. Do you plan on ever moving out of Chicago?
Um, Honestly, the way that it's hard to say just because of the amount of places that I do bounce around to right now while still having a home base in Chicago. Like I'm not short on time anywhere else. The app that we kind of use. I live with do you know Nabil
Oh yeah,
Lalu by chance? Lighter, yeah. So Nabil and Sawyer, two
yeah.
of my best friends. You
Oh
did
yeah,
a podcast with Sawyer, yeah. So two of my best friends, we live together down here in this house called we got an app. There's like this traveling nurses app called Furnished Finder or whatever. And it's basically just short-term leases. So the minimal lease or the minimum lease is like 25 days. So we just keep extending this 25-day lease and like doing that all around the country. Like if, I'm never really, have a shortage of time anywhere. So I don't know. It's working out where I get to be everywhere I want to be and living in Chicago right now. And I kind of like the Midwest the most in terms of like people. And I don't know, like couldn't do New York City. Don't know if I could do down here full time. LA is like my worst nightmare. Miami is like a fantasy land, you know what I mean? But it's great. Like I really enjoy, especially, hybrid's amazing. But there's something about Chicago in the Midwest, just like good people, you know what I mean? Good, hardworking people that seem to be a lot more honest and real than the vast majority of other places I go in the country. So kind of hard to pass that up, especially when thinking about like raising a family and where I'd maybe, like to have kids around and things like that. I feel like Chicago's a pretty solid spot.
oh yeah. The Midwest roots. I totally get it. It's where it's where it all started.
Right.
Yeah, well, I'll wrap things up here, but I want to ask you one more question. So, what do you have any hobbies outside of the gym?
So really, not much. I mean, I did martial arts was like my entire life, and I really wanted to do that to as high of a level as possible. The whole goal was like going to the Olympics, and I've always lived a super hyper focused kind of lifestyle before powerlifting my whole life. I did the same thing with Taekwondo, the way with the food and the training, and honestly, even quite a bit more dedication there, to be honest. And then as soon as I was the focus to powerlifting, but nothing that I'd consider a legitimate hobby. You know, hanging out with friends and listening to music. That's really what I like enjoy. But watching movies, whatever it is. But when you're really chasing it down, that maximal strength thing and that world records, the vast majority of other stuff kind of seems to detract.
Yeah, that's what we talked about earlier, where you're kind of all in on powerlifting right now, and
Yeah,
that's
it's a
okay.
tough. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
sure if we have this conversation in 10 years,
Oh yeah.
completely different answer. You know what I mean? But as of right now, it's kind of that all in thing that I know you can relate to, maybe even a higher degree than I do myself.
Yeah, I definitely relate. I've heard a thing every 7 years, you kind of transform into a new person with new interests, new personality. So I'm sure it'll change big time for you. But no, thanks for coming on, man. It was awesome talking to you. And
Dude,
we'll have to
thank you
do it
so much for
again.
having me on. I hope we end up in the same place sooner or later.
Yeah, of course, brother. I'll run into you at some point, I'm sure. But thanks, buddy.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thank you.
Yes, sir.